Hello and welcome to our product demonstration of Exponent Load Ready, our latest extension, currently in the beta release, but soon to be a release candidate in the near future. For today, we're going to work with a sample case file. We have, as you can see on the screen, a case loaded in X-Ways forensics. We've tagged a number of different items for part of our production. So what we're going to do here, we're going to simulate that we have some files that we want to produce for disclosure. So what we have here, if you look in the top right corner, the little 7 there, and the square indicates we have 7 items that have been tagged. Now that's just for the current folder. We have a number of items here. If I explore recursively, we have a number of 54 altogether. So I'll turn off the recursive feature there, and we'll go back to the preview, the gallery mode. So now that we have demonstrated we have 54 items we want to disclose, and the next thing we need to do is simply go up to the Tools menu and run the extensions. Now you'll see here Exponent has been already loaded. We can click OK, and up in a minute will come our Exponent Launchpad, and from there we'll be able to select our Load Ready icon, as you can see here on the far right. Now, one of the things that will come up is a notice, a window, that reminds you or advises you to make sure that the time notation in your case file is configured as shown on the screen here. And the reason why we do this is so that the evidence, when it's produced in the production folder, is sorted chronologically, but also it's discernible by all that work with the data. And so what we've chosen here, and it's an adaptation that we here at API Forensics have implemented across all of our tools, is a date format that is 4 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, followed by 2 digits for the day. And you'll also notice here that we're requiring you to have the time bias enabled as well. Now, if you need to make a change in order to your case file, that is, before continuing, then once you close this window, you can click cancel here and close the window, go into your general settings, make the changes, close down X-Ways Forensics, and then restart it and catch up where we are here. So once we're here, we got a little message here that says, please remember to tag some files before you continue. So we have that, so we can click OK. And up comes the Exponent Load Ready window. Now, this is a powerful tool, but it's also a very simple tool. And the first step here, getting started, needs to go out and collect in a very sparse fashion the information about all the files that have been tagged. So to do that, and before we do anything else, we have to click on Get Started. Now there's an option here before we do that that talks about exclude file types that are not supported by Relativity. Click here for details. So we'll click on that and it'll spawn up an instance of our browser. And I'll just drag this into view here quickly off of my second monitor so that you can see it really quickly. And this here is Relativity's website, and as you scroll down here, it talks about all the different file formats that it supports. And the conclusion you can draw from this quickly is that it supports pretty much everything except for something like a DLL or an executable. If you wanted to make sure that what you have selected conforms to the Relativity supported file formats or types, you can check that off. By default, because chances are you're selecting stuff that is of relevance, you can just leave that unchecked. Let's go ahead and click Get Started. Now before I do that, I will back up and I will say this, that if you happen to just select everything in your case file without any regard to the content, then I would recommend that you do check that off, because it'll strip it out, and that way you're not disclosing stuff that will be not only irrelevant to the e-discovery platform users, but also will slow down your investigation. So I've I'm going to leave it the way it is, only because we've selected a bunch of JPEGs. Sorry that took a little while. I just want to be clear. Let's click on Get Started. And Load Ready has gone through, collected the information about the selected records, and now we're ready to move on to the next step. Here we're asked to define an output folder for our production, and we've selected this folder here. The next step is to define which of the columns from X-Ways Forensics, if you look in the background there, the columns, we've got name, description, type, and they're loaded here in this list. Now, by default, we have checked off the columns that we believe would be most useful for a production. Now, this is entirely up to you to configure how you see fit. You can check off anything you want. The one column that you can't remove is this one here. The unique ID is good, because that is your unique identifier, and we'll explain that in a minute once we see the output. If we're happy with what we have here, then we can click on the next step, and that is configuring the production options. Now, if you're familiar with E-discovery, there's something that is commonplace in formatting for load ready files and output, and that is something called Bates numbering. So Bates numbering is a unique identification system, numbering system basically, and it allows production creators to identify all the artifacts in the case file with a unique number. Now, what we have added here is the option to create a Bates prefix. So to explain this simply, the output will be a series of files, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with some zeros in front of it for padding. And you have the option for clarity to prefix those output file names with something meaningful. So in this case here, we might say, okay, let's say we are with the Acme Police Department. And let's say we're providing a disclosure or production here for a case number that happened in 2023. And it was case number 9876. Now, I'll draw your attention to these zeros here. One of the things that we advocate, it's personal preference, is to always pad numbers, especially case numbers or outputting indexing numbers or sequential numbers, with zeros. The reason being is when you sort anything, whether it be in a spreadsheet or Windows Explorer, you'll be able to sort everything chronologically. So this is our Bates prefix. If you enter an invalid character, it'll complain. We have this looking just fine for us. And the file compression, we will leave this alone. For the purpose of this demonstration, it's there on the screen, but the beta version right now currently doesn't complete the compression of the output, and we will be having that ready shortly. For now, the output will consist of some files, and we'll explain those here in a minute. The final step is to configure some information about your organization. Now in this case here, this is from a prior test run, only we're not going to call it corporation, we're going to call it police department. And we'll leave John Doe, we'll remove this from director, and we'll call this officer in charge. And we'll use 007 for the employee ID or badge number. So when we're ready, we can click on Build Load Ready Production. And very quickly, it has gone through and we have completed the production. Let's take a look. So we'll close this, and then we'll close this here. And I will launch an instance of Windows Explorer and we'll take a look. So I'm going to drag the Windows Explorer window from my other monitor here. And you can see here we have a folder called Exponent Load Ready. So we double click on that. We have some files here. The first file here is our README file, and I'll just point this out. It contains information about the creation of the production itself, what tool was used, the date and time, the submitting agency details, the product production information, start and time, how many files, and also a point of interest here, all dates and times have been reconciled to universal coordinated time, basically UTC plus 0. And the reason why we do this is so that information coming from multiple departments, agencies, whether it be nationwide or international, will all be compatible at the recipient end by the review platform. The next item I'll point out is the payload.zip. It's a file that's created, but it's not actually, doesn't contain anything in this iteration of Load Ready, as I mentioned before, so we'll skip over that. And then we have two elements that go hand in hand, and this is our production. Our production consists of two things: a files directory with subfolders, and then a load file.dat. This file here, the load file, contains all of the metadata of the items that we have tagged and that we have exported, whereas the files folder contains the data that we have outputted. So let's go back here for a second and take a look at the load file. When I double click to show it in Notepad, you'll see a lot of interesting information, and it has a lot of funny characters, and these funny characters that you see here are Unicode, and they are defined by not only just Relativity as a platform, but they are pretty much industry practice delineators for load files for e-discovery platforms. In this case here, this is adopted for Relativity, and at the time of this video, I suspect that it's also compatible with other platforms such as Summation, Eclipse, Relativity, I mentioned that, and other e-discovery platforms. So that explains these odd characters, and this separates the actual columns. There's other characters in here which I won't bother you with that delineate rows or records. So in the first few lines, you'll see here embedded between those Unicode characters some plain text, and this plain text are the column names. And you'll notice that we have two column names that have been added on top of the list from our wizard form that we selected. Remember, we had that list with the check mark columns. When the load file was created, Load Ready created two extra columns. One is the Bates number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. 0 padded, by the way. And then the unique identifier. They call it the identifier column. Relativity requires a column called identifier. And for the purposes of distinction, across all evidence, across all media and artifacts that you bring into X-Ways, we have, again, we use the unique ID. And that is something that looks like this right here. This is the GUID. That's the unique identifier. And by way of example, this is the relative path, which points to that artifact in our files directory. So you can see here, there's the files directory, followed by the subfolder, and then we have our Bates prefix, and then we have our Bates number. Oh, sorry, that's the Bates prefix right here, our case number. This is the Bates number, followed by the extension. And this goes on and on and on, right to the bottom. One particular point of interest is that the data standards for the load file requires the American date format. So as you can see here, as I've highlighted, we have month, day, and then year. When I close this, we can go quickly into the files folder, and you'll see here the outputted information. And this represents all the data that has been selected from our case file. Now, for completion of the production, you could do one of two things. You could just simply select these items, right mouse click, send to a compressed zip folder. And that's probably the easiest way to do it. In the release candidate for Load Ready, we will do this for you, again, by loading it into the payload.zip file. So this completes our demonstration of the soon-to-be released Load Ready extension for Exponent. If you have any questions, please reach out to us, and we thank you for your time.